The FBI wasn't supposed to find a network. They showed up at Gene Hackman's Santa Fe estate expecting a closed case. 2 elderly deaths, natural causes, quiet paperwork, a file that would be signed, stamped, and forgotten within a week. But what they found beneath the mansion, it did not end at a single chamber. It spread, and whatever it connects to was never meant to be discovered. The first assumption. At first, everything followed the official narrative. An isolated property, a reclusive couple, weeks of silence before discovery. The kind of case that, on paper, explains itself. A tragic story, certainly, but a simple one. Elderly, remote, disconnected. The kind of story that gets 2 paragraphs in the local paper and then disappears. But federal investigators did not leave. They expanded the perimeter. That alone raised questions. Because when a case is truly closed, when 2 deaths are truly natural, truly isolated, truly unremarkable, you do not expand the perimeter. You do not call in additional units. You do not request equipment that takes 3 days to arrive. You sign the papers and move on. They did not move on. And the moment agents descended into the underground chamber beneath the library, the one hidden behind the mahogany panel, behind a wall that showed no seams, they realized something critical. This was not a bunker. Bunkers end. This did not. The shift initial reports described a single vault, a sealed chamber, 47 crates, symbols carved into stone along the lower walls that no one has publicly identified, categorized, or explained. That alone should have been enough to generate questions. It didn't, because the real discovery came after thermal imaging was conducted on the surrounding rock. What they saw did not match a single room. It showed branching voids, multiple, extending outward in at least 3 directions from the central chamber, at depths exceeding 300 feet below the surface. The network was not beneath the room. The room was the entrance to the network. The Network 1 agent described it like this. At first, we thought we were looking at structural anomalies, natural cavities, maybe old excavation work. But the shapes, they were too precise. The voids were not random. They followed linear paths with precise angles and consistent widths, geometry that does not occur naturally at that depth. Geometry that suggested intentional design. Tunnels, and not just one, a system. The kind of system that takes years to build, the kind that requires planning, coordination, and silence maintained across a very long time. The mapping attempt. Within 48 hours, ground-penetrating radar units were brought in under restricted clearance. No public documentation exists on what they found. The equipment manifest was not logged through standard channels. The technicians were contracted under non-disclosure agreements with provisions that extended beyond the duration of the investigation. But leaked summaries suggest the following: at least 5 separate tunnel branches extending from the primary chamber. Depth variations between 280 and 470 feet below grade, which is inconsistent with any standard construction or mining project on record for this region. Structural reinforcements in certain segments, not natural rock or erosion patterns, but deliberate reinforcement with materials brought in specifically for this purpose. Intersections that imply planned connectivity, junctions designed with the same intention as any engineered infrastructure. One branch extends far beyond the estate boundary, past property lines, past recorded land ownership, into territory that does not appear on any modern survey map. That detail was not included in any public-facing communication from the Bureau. The problem. Here is where things stopped making sense. the construction methods did not match any known period. Some sections showed 19th century stonework, hand-cut, mortared in patterns consistent with late 1800s southwestern construction. This was the kind of work done by skilled laborers who knew what they were building and who were paid never to speak of it. Others had mid-20th century concrete reinforcement, poured in sections. Structural rebar appeared at intervals, suggesting engineering specifications, not improvisation. This was the kind of work done by contractors who signed paperwork that no longer exists. And in certain areas, particularly in two branches that ran deeper than the others, materials were found that have not been publicly identified at all, not classified, not explained, not referenced in any official communication, just omitted. As if acknowledging their presence would require answering questions that no one in that investigation was prepared to answer on record. The second entrance. 3 days into the underground survey, something changed everything. A secondary access point was detected, not beneath the mansion, not anywhere on the estate grounds, but nearly half a mile away, buried beneath a stretch of state forest outside the property's perimeter, in an area without any recorded structures, any development history, or any reason to dig. No visible evidence above ground, no disturbed soil, no construction marks, no access road that would explain how equipment got in. Just a sealed entry point, reinforced from below, connected directly to the main chamber beneath Hackman's library by a tunnel that ran beneath property lines, beneath a public road, beneath a dry creek bed, without interruption. Meaning this network was never meant to rely on the house at all. The mansion was not the origin point. It was not the headquarters. It was not even the most important piece. It was just one access point among several. One door among many. And someone had gone to considerable effort to ensure that if this particular door was ever found, the others would remain hidden. The historical gap. Local historian Dr. Elena Vasquez had already uncovered irregularities in the property's ownership history before the investigation began. But once investigators realized the tunnels extended beyond the estate, they began looking at a much larger timeline, one that stretched back not decades, but generations. What they found: land parcels in the surrounding area had changed ownership in coordinated patterns. Not random purchases, coordinated ones. Properties that formed a loose but connected geography above the suspected tunnel routes had been quietly consolidated over time. Several of those purchases were made through anonymous trusts dating back to the 1930s. Legal entities that still existed on paper, but traced back to nothing identifiable. Multiple properties above suspected tunnel routes had been demolished, rebuilt, or left deliberately undeveloped over the course of decades, in a pattern that only becomes visible when you step back far enough to see all of it at once. Almost as if someone had been maintaining access, quietly, over generations. Not one person, not one organization. A relay of custody that passed from hand to hand across nearly a century, with no public record of the chain and no visible connection between the parties involved. The sealed sections, not all tunnels, were accessible. In fact, most were not. Several branches terminated in sealed barriers, not collapsed sections, not blocked by debris or the passage of time, but deliberately and carefully closed off. The seals showed no deterioration, no weathering, no signs of age inconsistent with their purpose. Steel doors with no visible locking mechanism were present on the accessible side. Concrete plugs had been poured in place to fill the full cross-section of the passage. Reinforced barriers were engineered to withstand pressure from either direction. One agent described it plainly: These were not built to keep people out. They were built to keep something contained or controlled. The distinction matters. A barrier designed to keep people out faces outward. It is a security measure and a deterrent. A barrier designed for containment faces inward. It is a management measure. Something on the other side of those barriers was being managed. And whatever that something was, no one on the FBI team was cleared to find out. The movement. Then came the detail that has not been officially acknowledged anywhere. Sensors placed within the main chamber and left running through the night to monitor environmental conditions detected airflow changes. The changes were not constant. They were not environmental in the passive way you would expect from connected underground spaces equalizing pressure over time. The shifts were intermittent, occurring at irregular intervals, brief and directional, as if air was being displaced from somewhere deeper in the network. One technical report described it as a pressure shift consistent with large internal spaces opening or closing. But no one on the FBI team was moving through those sealed sections. The sealed barriers were intact. The secondary entrance had not been accessed by investigators. No authorized personnel were in those tunnels, meaning if something caused that pressure shift, it was not them. That report was not included in any summary distributed beyond the immediate investigation team. The final weeks. Neighbors had already reported strange activity in the years leading up to the deaths. Standard reports, the kind that get filed and forgotten. But investigators began re-examining those accounts with a different lens. Underground vibrations at night, described by multiple residents as a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to come from below the floor rather than outside the walls. Brief power fluctuations across nearby properties. Not outages, fluctuations, the kind caused by something drawing significant current in an irregular pattern. Unmarked vehicles, different makes and different plates, rotating in and out, arriving and departing from the area without using any recorded access roads. Seen by at least 4 separate residents over a span of 3 years. None of them connected to each other. None of them with any reason to fabricate the account. At the time, these reports were dismissed. Separately, they were easy to explain. Geology, aging infrastructure, rural traffic patterns. Now, looked at together, they do not dismiss anymore. They corroborate. Because if the network extends beyond the estate, if its active sections run beneath the surrounding properties, then whatever activity was occurring beneath that ground would not have been confined to one location. The vibrations, the power fluctuations, the vehicles, they were not anomalies. They were evidence of operation. Hackman's role. This is the part no one can agree on. Why would Gene Hackman live above something like this? There are 3 theories, and none of them are comfortable. The first, he didn't know. He purchased the property unaware of what lay beneath it. A wealthy man buys a beautiful estate in the Santa Fe Hills. He knows what the realtor told him. He knows what the inspection revealed. He doesn't know about the chamber behind the mahogany panel, because that panel was built to look like a wall, and it had looked like a wall for years before he arrived. It's possible. But it doesn't explain the security systems, extensive, layered, far beyond what any private residence requires. It doesn't explain the non-disclosure agreements signed by staff who worked there for less than a season. It doesn't explain the document reorganization that reportedly took place in the final months before his death. The second, he discovered it later. He bought the property innocently, and at some point, months in, years in, he found something. A door, a passage, a room that was not on any blueprint. And then he spent years trying to understand what he'd inherited. The security systems begin to make sense under this theory. So do the non-disclosure agreements. So does the restricted access. A man who discovers something he can't fully explain and can't safely expose tries to control it the only way he can, by controlling who comes near it. That would align with reports of his increasing reclusion in the final decade. A man who knows something he can't share. The third, he already knew. The property was not a coincidence. It was a selection. And the selection was not random. It was a responsibility passed quietly from one custodian to the next, owner to owner, decade to decade, not through any public process, but through channels that left no record. Under this theory, Gene Hackman was not just a man who lived above something. He was the current holder of something. And whatever that responsibility required of him, he fulfilled it until he no longer could. The questions no one is asking. If the tunnel network predates the mansion, and the construction evidence suggests it does by decades, then someone built it before this estate existed. Before this estate was a twinkle in any architect's eye. They built it, accessed it through other means, maintained it through generations of coordinated land management, and at some point integrated this property into the system as one node among several. That raises questions that go well beyond Gene Hackman. Who commissioned the original construction? Who funded it? Who enforced the silence of everyone who worked on it? What is in the sealed sections? What caused those pressure shifts? And if someone was still using those tunnels, accessing them through the secondary entrance, through whatever other entrances have not been found yet, who are they? Because they were not stopped by the FBI's arrival. They were not flushed out by the investigation. They adapted, or they simply waited. The silence. Since the discovery, the FBI has refused to confirm the existence of any tunnel network beyond the initial chamber. Access to the estate remains fully restricted. No independent structural surveys have been permitted. No geological teams, no academic researchers, no journalists operating with any cooperation from authorities. All requests for structural data, ground-penetrating radar results, or environmental monitoring logs have been denied under investigative privilege provisions. The secondary entrance has never been publicly addressed. The materials found in the deeper tunnel sections have never been identified in any official communication. The symbols carved into the stone have not been explained. The 47 crates have not been inventoried publicly. The pressure anomaly report has not been acknowledged. None of this on its own is proof of anything. But all of it together is a pattern, and patterns have a way of meaning something. The buyer. Despite all of this, despite an active federal investigation, despite restricted access, despite the complete absence of public transparency about what was found, the property is already in the process of being transferred to an anonymous offshore trust, structured through 3 layers of legal entities across 2 jurisdictions. No names attached to any of them that trace back to a verifiable individual. No public disclosure of funding sources. Just enough capital, moving fast enough to secure the land before the investigation reaches any kind of formal conclusion. Before the public record is complete. Before anyone can ask who owns it now and expect an honest answer. The speed of that acquisition is the most telling detail in this entire story. Because in ordinary circumstances, when a property is the active site of a federal investigation, when its owner has just died under circumstances still being examined, when its grounds contain structures of unknown origin and unknown purpose, buyers do not move fast. Lawyers move slowly. Complications mount. Title transfers stall. Unless someone already knew they needed to move, unless someone had been watching this investigation from the beginning. Unless someone on the outside of this story has more information about what is inside that estate than anyone who has gone public has admitted. The question. This was never just a hidden room. It was never just a sealed vault with 47 crates and strange carvings. It's a system, a network that was designed, built, maintained, and operated across a span of time that dwarfs any single person's involvement. One that existed long before the mansion was built above it. One that continues to extend far beyond its boundaries. One that, based on the airflow anomalies, the coordinated land acquisitions, the unmarked vehicles, and the rapid property transfer, may still be active. Not a relic, not an artifact. Active. The real question is not what was found beneath the house. It is not even what is in the sealed sections, or who built the network, or why it was routed through this particular piece of land. The real question is simpler and more unsettling than any of those. If someone is still using this network, if the pressure shifts were real, if the vehicles were real, if the coordinated acquisitions spanning nearly a century were real, then the discovery of this estate was not the end of something. It was the exposure of something that is still ongoing. And whatever was operating beneath that ground before the FBI arrived did not stop when they got there. It just stopped being visible. Drop your theories below, because if even part of this network is still active, if even one of those sealed tunnels leads somewhere that still matters to someone, then whatever was hidden beneath that estate was never buried to stay forgotten. It was buried to stay safe.